Hello, it's Kevin Owen here at RT tonight. Good to have your company. Starting with that breaking news I just spoke of, then France has in the last hour become the first European state to recognise Syria's newly formed rebel coalition as a sole representative of the Syrian people. Let's get an update from RT's Middle East correspondent Paula Sleer. Hi again, Paula. What does France's announcement mean then?
Well, as you say, we've just heard that France has recognised the Syrian opposition coalition as the sole legitimate representative of the Syrian people. This makes it the first European nation to do so. Now, we have heard from the French President François Hollande, who says that the Syrian opposition coalition will act as a temporary government in the future. He says that once the Syrian National Council has formed a transitional government, then the whole issue of the supply of weapons and arms will be addressed. Now, earlier today, 6 Gulf states recognized this opposition coalition, one of them being Qatar. And we heard from its foreign minister that the recognition would remove obstacles to securing arms for Syrian rebels. So a lot of eyebrows being raised over the whole issue of arms now making their way in a much more legitimate way to the Syrian opposition. It is important to make a parallel. Back in 2011, on the 10th of March, France became the first country to recognize the National Transitional Council in Libya. Now, if you remember, this was the rebel fighters that came together there immediately following France's recognition. Other countries recognized them, and ultimately this led to foreign intervention happening in Libya. The Arab League, however, has given a hesitant welcome to this new coalition. It says that it is a primary negotiator, but certainly the Arab League has stopped short of recognizing it as the legitimate representative of the Syrian people. And some members of the Arab League, most notably Iraq and Lebanon, are not fully supportive of the Syrian opposition. So many questions, among them just how feasible is this opposition coalition. It really is a patchwork organization bringing together people and organizations of different political and religious affiliations. It also has long been ripped apart internally by bickering, and there still are many questions over how much influence it has on the ground inside Syria.
Many questions that we'll be attempting to follow up with your help. For now, Paula Sleer, thanks very much. Just a bit earlier on this evening, I spoke at length to Fahd al-Masri, he's communications manager for the Free Syrian Army. He told me they've always rejected any possibility of dialogue with President Assad.
Him remaining in power is impossible. No dialogue, no negotiation with Bashar al-Assad. Certainly no one, no political power will stoop to negotiation, because the Syrian people will abandon any faction that steps into dialogue with him. So no, there will be no talks with Bashar al-Assad.
Let's talk more about the implications of the French decision tonight. I'm joined live by Con Hallinan, contributing editor of the Foreign Policy and Focus think tank. Con, hi. France, then, the first to recognise Libya's opposition. Now it's the first to recognise the Syrian rebel group. Do you see any parallels there?
Unfortunately, I see a lot of parallels, and it's exactly the wrong thing to do at this point. Right now, there is a 4-point peace plan that was put out by China. It's a little vague at this point, but a couple of government-run newspapers in Damascus have said that it looks like it's a basis to begin negotiations and some talks on a peaceful resolution, a political resolution of the current situation. By France stepping in and doing this is exactly what France did in Libya, which is that the UN passed a resolution. Instead of attempting to negotiate a peaceful resolution, the French started bombing 3 days after the UN Security Council passed its resolution. I think what's happening in this case is that France is essentially intervening in the situation, is supporting a group that basically says there's no other solution but a military solution. It's the worst thing that could happen.
OK, but France now, who next, do you think?
Well, this is spreading everything. I mean, this is right out of Shakespeare. You know, cry havoc and let loose the dogs of war. Situation is very bad in Lebanon at this point. You have instability in Turkey. You have
no. Who next in line to recognise the group?
Oh, in terms of recognizing the groups, I would suspect that Britain might be next. I mean, that was the way it went in Libya. First Syria, then Britain, then the United States. I'm not sure the United States is going to step in at this point, but I do suspect that Britain will be fairly close behind France. I very much doubt that France would have made this move unless they had gotten some other agreement from people in NATO to join in with a recognition.
Con, Paris now considering arms shipments to the group. What level of involvement do you think France could have from now on, taking in everything you've just said? Is the state likely to go further than just weapons?
Well, I do think what it does is that it's a green light for opening up the arms shipments to the rebels. I mean, at this point, there's an arms embargo against Syria, and there's no arms embargo in terms of what Qatar and Saudi Arabia are doing. But when France steps into it, it means that's a whole different level. And you basically have a situation where you could you could have anti-aircraft missiles, anti-tank missiles, artillery. I mean, you're gonna raise the level of the war enormously. And I think what you're going to end up doing is creating larger and larger amounts of civilian casualties.
Con, thanks for your initial thoughts about this developing news story tonight. Good to get you on the line so quickly. Appreciate it. Con Halloran there, contributing editor of Foreign Policy in Focus.
Glad to be here.